This is the center lesson, number 7. It's smack dab in the middle. It's also my favorite lesson. I love the word righteousness. It's up there on my very favorite words in the Bible. And what's so important about this, and this is a good example of how Scripture and the covenant story has already informed us about what we're seeing here. Throughout the Old Testament, we're constantly reminded of God's righteousness. David in the Psalms, Isaiah especially, cries out for God's righteousness, for his salvation. David talks about witnessing God's righteousness and faithfulness and salvation. There's a verse that Paul really loves from Psalms 143, 1 and 2, where David is crying out for God to hear him and to answer him in his righteousness and in his faithfulness. And then David speaks to himself and says, because no man can be justified before you. I have to trust your righteousness because no man can be considered righteous before you. And so that's the interesting thing that we see in the Old Testament, before we even get to the New, is that God is the righteous one. And because he's righteous, he deals with sin, he saves his people, he keeps coming back for them. We can count on his righteousness. At the same time, the Old Testament keeps telling us that our righteousness is like filthy rags. Now, the law back in Deuteronomy 6 says if you'll obey, when you obey my statutes, that will be your righteousness. If you'll obey. And that, of course, there's the big if, because Israel, chronically, and just even us as human beings, we fall short. Even if our intention is to obey, we often fall short. And so the contrast between the works of the law and the righteousness of faith, or the righteousness of the law and the righteousness of faith, is really contrast between God's righteousness and ours. It's especially problematic when we begin to get proud of our righteousness. We begin to boast in our righteousness like the Pharisees did. We see, even in the law itself, right after God says to Israel, if you will obey these statutes and commandments, it will be your righteousness. Right after that, he says, but don't think that I'm doing all this because you're righteous. You know, he even checks them then. Don't boast in your righteousness because it's nothing before me. Our righteousness is as filthy rags. And that's what Paul the Pharisee came to realize when he met Jesus. He considered himself blameless under the law. I was doing all this. I was doing everything I was supposed to do, and he was proud of it. And then he met Jesus, and he says, my righteousness is like dung. It's like that's pretty low. But that's because he met the righteousness of God in Jesus Christ. And this is my favorite lesson. I hope everyone enjoys it. To me, it's the central lesson, not just of these 13, but it's central to the question of the relationship between the Old and New Covenant, between a righteousness that is, yes, it's based on God's declared revelation of what's right and wrong. That righteousness includes loving God and loving neighbor, the two great commandments. But ultimately, it's a righteousness that depends on our ability to perform it, our ability to obey. And we've already just learned in lesson 2 that Jesus is the righteous, and we are the unrighteous. And that's what Romans 1 through 3 is all about. God is righteous, and his righteousness is made manifest in Jesus, and our unrighteousness is covered. His righteousness is imputed to us if we will trust in him, if we'll hold on to him. And in the lessons to come, we'll see the consequences of that as the Spirit begins to work in us.